All right, hey, Zig here. Today on the show, we have the return of the great Pete Francis. Pete is a singer-songwriter, guitarist, and founding member of the band Dispatch. Dispatch has been a huge influence on me and my good friend and partner in crime, Dakota Michael Cross, who happens to be here with me right now.
Yes, I'm here on Zig At The Gig, and we're honored to speak with our good friend Pete Francis, who collaborated with us on our new track, Long-Legged Fly. That's right, Sea Level is coming out with a new song. It features Pete Francis, and we'll be releasing it on June 13th at the Winchester in Lakewood, Ohio.
If you're new to the show, Sea Level is a band Cody and I play in, C-Level. We are a high-energy funk-punk reggae rock group that takes 12-string guitars acoustically and runs them through Marshall amps. And we have the great honor of not only to have recorded a track with Pete, but we are playing a show with Pete at the Winchester. And what's crazy about this night, not only did we get to record and we're opening for a hero of ours, but we are going to be Pete's backing band. So June 13th at the Winchester in Lakewood, Ohio, we are going to be playing with Pete after we open for him, and after we share the song we recorded with him. And joining us on that bill will be
Broctopus from Pittsburgh and Songs for an Unknown God from Cleveland.
So if you're near the Cleveland area, if you're around Ohio, you're not going to want to miss this. Pete doesn't make it out this way too often. So this is kind of like a rare chance to get to see the great Pete Francis in a pretty close venue. Like I would say the Winchester, you can kind of get up and close and, you can see the sweat.
That's right. Pete even told us that if you want to get some stuff signed, he'd be willing to sign some stuff and take some photos. And if you are not in the Cleveland area, you can check out the song Long-Legged Fly on June 13th on all streaming platforms or wherever you get your music.
Yeah, so we have a wild night planned at the Winchester. And it's kind of one of those things that's hard to believe that we're even doing. Because for Coda and I, Dispatch has been a huge influence. I got to talk to Pete back in 2020, and it was a really profound conversation, and even that was kind of mind-blowing. So to think that we're doing what we're doing right now at this level is pretty insane.
Yeah, it's an absolute honor to not only get to have the podcast with Pete and have this wonderful conversation that you guys are about to hear, but it's a dream come true to be able to collaborate with him. And we get deep into that in the interview, and we get deep into the collaboration process. Pete kind of is doing a similar thing with some artists that he admires. And we get into all that. We get into the creative process. We get into alchemy and sorcery.
Sorcery!
So make sure you have your magic orbs ready, because this is a very fun conversation, and we hope you enjoy.
If you hear anything you like, if you can rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to great guests like Pete Francis and sharing his insight with you. So without further ado, this is Coda and I's conversation with Pete Francis.
How's teaching been going for you?
Well, right now I'm not teaching, but I am. Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm really, I mentioned to you guys on the call, just doing those newer versions of Smile with G Love, and then that reggae artist DeMarco. That was really cool. So those would come out this summer. So I've been sort of, getting the artwork ready for it. I'm working. Katie and I work. My wife and I work a lot on it, and it's always great having someone else. You guys probably feel this, where you can. You're bouncing the ideas off, and you look at it and you're like, it's done. And then you're like, wait, it could be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
right. Isn't that that's kind of the creative collaboration. It just keeps, I guess it's both great and infuriating sometimes too.
100%. And one thing I appreciate is when you're working with somebody on a thing that you're passionate about and they're passionate about, and there's both the vision of how it should be, right? And really what comes from that is kind of a balance of the two. But also to have someone to bounce ideas off of that, even if it's yeah, man, I don't like that at all. But just to know someone else cares that much makes it that much more impactful.
It's true. And then it's great when you can talk to people that can say why they don't like it, or even better, how could it be better? and then giving you a suggestion, and then you're like, I never thought of that, you know.
Yeah, no, that's huge. That's huge because I experience it all the time with just working with kids at work. Is just like a lot. If someone doesn't care, they're not going to say anything. They're going to let you just keep coasting around and like messing up. But if someone does care, they're going to be like, hey, do this, say that, this is going to sound better, look more polite, but
100%.
in the creative sense, is what's so awesome about a partnership like that.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like we got into it already, man. Like,
Yeah,
I like that. Cause I do have one more question on that. Is it kind of like, when you guys are working on a thing or seeing something through, is it more or less of like, equal in one way or the other, but is it more like, I think it's done. Like, do you find yourself being one of those roles more than the other? So do you find yourself being like, this is the done, or actually, I think, make it blue. You know what I mean?
I think that's a really good question, because I do think that there's part of me that wants it to be done, and maybe that's one thing that helps me get my work out and done. I don't know if the two of you guys have this relationship or other, but yeah.
Absolutely,
when you can talk and for instance, working on this G Love cover, I might have said, oh, that picture of me is fine. But Katie said, well, there are these other two. And then you look at those other two, and then she's like, oh, she's right. That could make the cover even better. So because she's a visual artist, that's been super helpful for me. And then I would say on the musical front, I ran into this Bonsai Caruso, the producer I was telling you about, with the Smile song that did these two versions. I was sort of like, well, do you want me to give you ideas, or are you going to give me ideas? And then he just kind of said calmly, it'll be a little bit of both, and I think at first I'm like, I could give you a ton of ideas, but I think he took that mellow approach of being like, let's make it a conversation as to, I don't know if you guys feel that when you're creating, like, let me get all my ideas in so you can hear it, and then, or how much are we, because if you think about it, like, we want to be heard, you want to be heard, we all want to feel like we're being heard. So I think that is a important part of the creative process, not only that you're giving ideas, but you're really listening to the person that you're collaborating with.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring that up, because this song, Long-Legged Fly, that we're putting out is the first single from our new record, which is the first time we've done collaborations like this, like we've done with you and other artists that are on the album. And so, just like you said, there was times where we felt like we overdid it. Like there was one specific person where Dave did. He was like, I gave him too many notes. I gave him too many notes. And then other times where we just kind of let it be free, and that seems to work best in most cases, But like you said, it's finding that happy balance of both. Like, you can't just set it off, but you can't take full control of it. It's a balance, and it's really interesting, especially like people being far away,
It is interesting. And sometimes I think about Rick Rubin and the fact that he's been a part of so many amazing records. And here he is, he's not a musician, right? But he's obviously so musical. So what is part of his secret? And at least sometimes I think that he probably allows people to be heard, and allows that kind of a decision or something happens naturally in the room. But I just think it's a pretty unique skill he has to have these amazing records sort of just...
Yeah, and they all sort of
kind of
sound.
bloom into existence,
Yeah.
Have you read his book? Have you read any of that?
I read his book. Yeah. I think he's a super deep obviously Zen person, and sometimes it's an amazing presence in a room that can allow creativity to happen, rather than even someone inserting a lot of ideas. And I think that's interesting about someone's presence. That's at least what I've experienced with some good Jack Gauthier, who did a lot of the early Dispatch stuff in Rhode Island. He kind of allowed us in our musical skills that really weren't that great musicians, but I think he allowed the music to happen truly as it was for us, as opposed to really either sugarcoating it or putting it in a certain direction. It was really, I don't know, just that his presence allowed this, bang bang to come out.
It is a really interesting phenomena. And like one thing I find with that statement, because like listening to that bang bang and silent steeples, like there's a lot of musicality in that. So I always find that interesting when you guys are like, we didn't know anything. I'm like, I've been trying to pick apart these harmonies and these progressions and these songwriting beats for forever. So like, it's always interesting, like at the same time when you kind of maybe don't have an idea of what you're doing, but you're doing it. Like,
yeah.
And I guess to be in a room with someone who may know that and may know how to direct that, but chooses not to.
Right.
Like,
I think that there's that balance of allowing the musicians to do it, giving them some. So with Long-Legged Fly, did this since the beginning of the track, did it feel different to you, or does this album feel different to you than other projects?
100%. And like, but it was the project itself came from like a bunch of, it was kind of Cody and I coping with a lot of loss and like trying to like celebrate all these things that are so meaningful to us because of the people who brought us into the opportunity to enjoy life. Like, I don't know, that's, but like with Long-Legged Fly, like recording that and like, being able to like, even just like being able to send a demo and like know that the presence of someone else was interested in it. Like, cause that's the first time I've ever sent anyone demos to be like, hey, do any of these songs sound interesting to you? And the first time I've ever done that was with you. And like, and to receive like, yeah, dude, this is cool. Like, I was like, oh my God, maybe I do know something. You know what I mean? It was like, and so like there was a total different presence with going into this, and like at points a little more like maybe a concern about some minor details at the same time, and like then also like everything in this can be completely different when it comes back. So there's almost like a hyper concern and then a hyper letting go.
Yeah. Well, I like the track. I think that it's like little things, the way you're doing the chords and fingering the chords, that you feel that your voice comes out. You know what I mean? And that's maybe you're talking about with Silent Steeples or Bang Bang. I think it's important. I keep coming back to this sort of the individuality that we each have and letting that shine, and that in itself is special and to be celebrated. But in a way, it's almost like, wait, you were just saying like, that's who I am? Sometimes it's over like, wait, I have to just uncover it. And that's part of, I think, the magic of being a creative person, is that so much of that is innately a part of us.
You know what? You saying that kind of makes me re-examine like what we were talking about with someone with a presence, right? I think maybe one thing that makes that presence of someone who just walks in the room and kind of causes inspiration by just being there is that person is maybe so kind of self-discovered or aware, and you like, Pete's Pete, man. He's going to do the Pete. Like that's him. He's him. There's this thing about somebody just being so sure of who they are And like, I think that's contagious. And I think that's maybe one of that unspoken frequency that makes people inspired and brings that out of people, if that makes sense.
That does make sense to me. It's a nice place to be when you're with musicians or other creative people, because there's a radiance that you detect, and then you're sort of like, well, shit, I can radiate, I can shine too.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's part of is discovering the best of our creative self.
And it's funny because like with music, we spend so much time like trying to learn something else and trying to like, okay, I'm inspired by Jimi Hendrix. I want to be able to rip some Hendrix stuff. And it's a weird world where like we celebrate those who are fully self-actualized, but we also like do everything the opposite way in a way to, you know what I mean? We kind of avoid ourselves. Like,
Right.
but it's like when you do figure that out and you do reach that, then you kind of have like a weird presence and like a weird, not weird, you have a presence and a vibration that I think other people latch onto, which is like, oh, Cody's Cody, you know, he's going to come in here and do the Cody thing. Like,
Right. And that, you know, to me, that is, that's part of the beauty of the search of being, you know, a creative being or working with other creative beings, and then having that feel like I know who I am.
yeah.
And Cody, you know, he knows who he is, you know, and we're making art here, and we're growing up, and maybe I'm not as sensitive as I was before when somebody didn't like that one lyric. Okay, maybe now we're working together and there's a point, or you may feel, no, this song is, you know, but I think I've gotten to the point now where I want to work with people and be like, how can it be better?
Yeah.
I want to know. And maybe to come back to the Rick Rubin thing, maybe they're asking themselves that on some of those records. That's really good. What if we...
Right. I gotta imagine. Like, have you seen the Chili Peppers doc when they're working with Rick Rubin?
Yeah, it was funny. I think I came on Instagram that, you know, moment when he's working out a bass line with...
He's giving it away, Rubin. I think.
Yeah, but I think Flea later on said, look, I had the line. He was just, you know...
Yeah. I saw that interaction too.
You know what I mean? Yeah, so... but Flea is Flea, so...
Right.
Yeah, it's a really interesting doc, though, and I love diving into Rick Rubin. Sometimes I'll pull up his discography, and I'll find a record by someone that I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'll just listen to it, and like, they all seem to kind of have a sound, or at least a cohesive kind of creative like thing that links them all. Whether it's like a Marcus King album or a Slipknot album, like he's really gone across the board, but they all still have like a common thread.
Did you any detection on what that thread might be?
I don't know what it is. It's
or is it something you felt?
I think it's like it's almost like what you said of like a letting go thing. Whatever artist he's working with, whatever project it is, and maybe this isn't for every single project he's worked on, but I would say the majority of the ones I come across have this feeling where that artist is, like you said, like as free as they can be and as open, like there's an openness to all of his records. You know what I mean? Like a really creative quality.
Yeah. Well, that Tom Petty Wildflowers record to me is a beautiful work of art, you know, and here's a guy. I don't think they wanted him as the producer. Who knows if he had done a record like that. But they got to the essence of something. I think it was so beautiful on that record.
It is really interesting because that makes me think of the Go-Go Bardello record they did with Rick Rubin. Mm-hmm. And it's more singer-songwriter based. And it's like, I think maybe the thing is like, it sticks out of the discography in a way. When you're listening to the Tom Petty,
was that more song oriented? That Go-Go Bordello record?
Yeah, it was like more singer-songwriter, like so it kind of sticks out of their work, or like how Blood Sugar Sex Magic sticks out of the Chili Peppers work.
I mean, he produced most of their work, but still, you get what you mean.
Yeah. but yeah, I think maybe that might be just one of the outliers too, or that the tone, the through tone that's there, is it kind of a striking a chord, and maybe might be like a refreshing thing for these artists. But on a spin question here. All right.
Yeah, man.
All right, on a spin question. Can you tell me, we started to talk about
You
this
can edit this any way you want. Whatever.
No, dude, I like it. I like it how...
Yeah, we just jumped in. It's fun.
No, man, I love it. I love, like, I go back to the last conversation we have all the time for little nuggets. Like...
I remember we had a nice talk that time.
It was Cody is like... going back to the support things, like Cody always supports me with the podcast, and as always will be like, "Yeah, man, that was great, dude. You set that guy up, and he totally missed every question." You know what I mean? Like Cody's.
Yeah, I'll tell Dave when he has a bad interview.
And our first talk, like Cody was like, "This is like, yeah, you can probably stop doing these now." Like, but we talked about briefly. There was a time where Dispatch opened up for themselves as a hair band. And I want to know that story.
Yeah, that was one of our finer moments, I think. I just thought that was really fun. I think it was at the Boston Garden. And just trying to... I think there are those great moments when it can be sort of a sign of humility that you could get up and be sort of silly in that rock star way. I come back to Spinal Tap as just being the absolute best movie to describe what it's like to be in a band, obviously. And we all kind of feel that. I think that was always sort of a part of our core, was like a bit of silliness and having fun. And there was just a moment later on in our career where we did it, and this hilarious thing on a bigger scale, obviously. But there was one, I remember for a St. Lawrence gig, we dressed up as beekeepers. And we went to the local hardware store because it was a Halloween party, and we found the beekeeper suit that everybody could have, like up to here. And then we're like, fuck it, there's some red knit hats, and do that. And I think it probably goes back to the three of us definitely identified with the Beastie Boys. At least I could say for me, the Check Your Head record was really important. But just seeing the Beastie Boys as being, I always think that's a real sign of artistry, when you can be cool and silly and funny. Like, that to me is pretty hip. And that was a moment with Dispatch that I always look fondly on, because, like when the Beastie Boys are dressed up as these old guys, or where they're in the subway in Japan, like directing, like, I don't know if there are artists that resonate with you guys like that, but to me, I think that's a nice moment when music and rock can get into not taking it too seriously, but at the same time being cool. So that's how I remember that.
Yeah, who comes to mind for you? I was thinking of like Dave Grohl. He's another
Dave Grohl.
one who's like really...
He does a good job. He's funny.
Yeah.
But also I think that sense of humor kind of brings down this guard of like, we are this thing we sell to you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you're like, okay, it's not just the Foo Fighter aesthetic, but this guy's funny, and like, I think if I passed that dude on the sidewalk, he'd be cool. You know what I mean? And I think that being able to be silly brings out that human coolness and more. I don't know. And I think it's one of those things that maybe have been more put off because like so many artists before, or not before, but there's like a certain seriousness to certain people that can be off-putting when you're like, oh wait, you're always this, I mean,
I kind of feel that right now culturally we're in this interesting place where, in my mind, I think things can get softer, things can a little more sophisticated, interesting. But it usually, goes in circles. But we're in a like you're saying right now, where it's like, wait, are you like this all the time?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's definitely like it needs a rounding, a smoother,
Smoother.
just in a lot of edges here. But so Dave Grohl definitely comes to me like there's a lot of bits from your guys' docs that we stick with, man.
Yeah. It's always funny, either you're talking seriously and get a thing of water in the face. I mean, it's like you borrow from Monty Python or all that great stuff, satire.
Another, I guess, like so Cody and I and our friend Gabe, we watch a lot of music docs and stuff too.
Yeah,
All those like little, to me, all the moments that really take it home are like the random funny moments of like Joe Strummer being like, "Cool show tonight," you know what I mean? Like, I remember there was one bit from I forget if it was Under the Radar or The Last Dispatch, but there's one where you guys are practicing and someone says something like, "There's a delay pedal that goes into a delay pedal that goes into a delay pedal." And it makes timeless music. I was like, I quote that bit all the time, like, and no one picks up on it. But so bits like that to me really hit.
Yeah, I agree. That kind of stuff is so fun to get a kick out of.
Was it in that one Beastie Boys film that I Shot That? Have you seen that?
Yeah, that's a really.
I saw that.
That one's a good one. Like,
that was a good one.
And that's the thing. Like even that they just had a less serious approach to things. So even something like that, most bands would just be like, yeah, we're going to shoot a live video. We're going to hire a film crew. You know what I mean? Their whole approach to that was like, yeah, we're going to just blow the whole system up. Like,
but, I don't know. I'm so sad that MCA is gone because, I mean, they're all amazing, but he was a pretty deep visionary, Yeah,
he was definitely the creative force.
Yeah, he was.
The group, yeah.
He was
a really
amazing.
underrated bass player, I think. He's still highly rated. It's not like people don't give him his props, but he definitely deserves more props.
I think that's a good point, man. I mean, again, like the dude is playing upright and playing root down or whatever, and just being so funky. And then you look at that video from when they're on Conan. Is it Sabotage?
Mm-hmm.
I just rewatched that. Like, that shit is so good.
Yeah.
It's intense. It's funny. It's cool. They
all in one song. You're right. Sabotage is kind of the defining Beasties song now that you mentioned it.
You guys will laugh at this because my brother directed I think it was our first music video for Here We Go. And that was done in California. And we were all excited because the director of photography, the DP, had done the Sabotage video. So we're like, dude, remember the shot of the hubcaps? And they're going to be doing our video. And we were like, oh, fuck, this is sick,
Yeah.
And we got these orange jumpsuits. And the shot, originally, it was one fell swoop. And the original cover was black and red. But then, I don't know whose idea it was, but then we took a still from the video of us running in those orange prison suits, and then that became the cover of Bang Bang.
Okay.
That was from
cool.
from that video.
Very cool. I always wondered what that was because it's like kind of this like grainy sort of like
yeah, which makes sense now because it's a still shot of it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, while we're on the topic of bass playing, I was curious. Like you have a really interesting approach to playing bass. I think Chad does too. But I was just curious. Do you still play? Do you still practice bass? Do you still play? Do you
Yep.
Is it? Oh, he's like, he's like Spider-Man with instruments.
I'm like the Spider-Man instrument guy. So this is
cool.
This was kind of the first official Dispatch bass. Kind of funny story. I went into Rudy's music, and I think because Stefan Lassard and some other cool bass player was playing the Warwick bass, we thought, oh, the Warwick would be cool. But I came home with the Warwick, looking at everybody, and we're just like, that's not us. Let's you got to return that, Pete. So I was like, all right. I returned it, and then I went up to the bass room, and then I saw this thunderous beast. So this is a 1977 Music Man.
Very cool.
And yeah, but really so much of my inspiration to play bass, my older brother Leif played bass. So I was definitely watching him a lot, and then watching that whole technique. And it was funny, I don't know if you guys have seen this. I think it's out on the internet now, but there's River Phoenix is interviewing Flea.
Yeah.
I have a DVD of it.
Same.
Yeah, and I saw that many years ago, and I just thought it was really cool. It was a real conversation about River, who obviously liked playing bass or was interested in it, and then talking to Flea, who is this sick bass player. And so right off the bat, that video definitely, I was inspired by that.
It's one of those, like, because I came across it as like a music instructional video, right? Because it does have some tabs and stuff with it. And like when you watch those, they're usually like, here's an example. It's a very formal lesson, which those are great. And like they're very useful. But that one stuck out like a sore thumb because it wasn't like that. It was just like, here's an idea, and I play it like I'm, like a Fleaism.
Yeah.
Like, and it just
Flea had such good descriptions.
Yeah.
Of the playing, where I think we get bombarded with like, subscribe now, subscribe.
Totally.
And you're like, it's nice to like hear when people are just getting down.
Yeah, it was definitely, and it was like one of those things, like Flea can like talk about this microphone and make it the most beautiful thing you've ever like heard or seen. You know what I mean? Like Flea, Pepper's got that way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they're an extraordinary band. I mean, you could just like look at Frusciante and what a wildly cool guitar player he is. And then how the two of them work together. And then I think in that River Phoenix video at the end, he jams with Chad Blake, right?
Yeah.
I feel like at the end they jam.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's what makes it cool, because it's like Dave said, it's a cross between like an instructional video and like a documentary or interview, and also like a jam video. Like it's really a kind of best of all the worlds as far as instructional things for a young musician goes.
Yeah, 100%.
And I would even, before we leave this doc, because we haven't. I love that DVD. But the thing, it also kind of starts to teach you those lessons that no other music school kind of teaches you, right? If you go to school for music, or you study music in an academic sense, or if you're going to the DVD school at that time, or now YouTube Academy, you learn a lot of like technique, approach, and like but not a lot of feel things. And one thing that whole package does is kind of make you start to think of things in a feeling way, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, but yeah, so that I think that was an important, like, for a lot of people to get bits to start to think of it in that way.
Yeah, I think you brought up a great word, feel, and it's not really taught as much. How do you teach feel, or maybe you talk about feel? But I think feel is a super important part of how you become your own musician.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's hard because like that's the one thing music does, right? It's for us to react to with emotion and feeling, and like, but at the same time, like it's the one, and it's also completely transcribed in a way where you can understand every aspect of what you're supposed to do to make this feeling. If you're really good at reading music, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you're not, it's like, Anyway, so it's like the one time you can have your entire emotional like complex transcribed and available for someone to completely understand. But then at the same time, someone can be mimicking it perfectly and still not feel it, which is crazy to me. Like, how can you have a feeling transcribed?
Especially on bass. I feel like bass is one of the most feel-orientated instruments.
Sure. That I agree. You know, I don't know if you guys. Last night I'm watching the Sly and the Family Stone documentary.
Oh, that was a really good one. Yeah. That one, like, for like 3 days after I saw it, I was just no music was getting played but Sly. Like, and then we wrote a song like a week later, and I was like, okay, guys, let's do this part. Bum 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 bum. The dance to the music riff, like I totally copped it.
I know. But just an example of like feel and Sly being like, you be who you are and you be who you are and you're cool.
Yeah,
and
you're almost more of a producer.
Black, you're a woman and you're like that shit to me is that's the good stuff. You know, that's feel, that's real clarity.
Absolutely.
And there's some funny moments in that doc.
George Clinton. Very funny. I mean, come on, they're hilarious.
Yeah, George Clinton was very funny in that documentary.
But so kind of jumping into like when you guys were like starting to write and play and like, you like, were you playing bass at first or were you like songwriting at first? Like, or was it kind of like a hodgepodge of like everything?
It was a little bit of a hodgepodge, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, really, the band's roots are hanging out with a few acoustic guitars. You know, when I first met Chad, he told me he was a trombone player. I didn't know initially that he was a guitarist or songwriter. And I invited him to band practice thinking he was just a trombone player. And then so from there, I learned about the other stuff. But definitely the roots were like, hey, we got some acoustic guitars, we got some songs. And then I think there was this, I don't know, a little bit of a desire to go beyond just an acoustic band to a band that, okay, you know, I'm going to figure out some bass stuff, and Brad is getting his drum chops together. But it really started out pretty basic at the beginning.
What was the early songwriting like? Like, I'm curious with this, like me and Dave were talking about with songs like Hey Hey or what's another one?
Bridges or...
Yeah, so with the songs where you guys are all three singing simultaneously, like who wrote what and how was it decided who would sing what? Like...
Yeah, so with some of those songs, like I brought Bridges to the table as a song that I wrote in high school, you know, and or maybe freshman year of college, you know. And then, sorry, what was the other part of the question? What other song did you mention?
Hey Hey.
Yeah, Hey Hey. So Hey Hey, that might have been something, hey, 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 like that Chad. And then, you know, Brad just had a unique talent for harmony. You know, there are not many people that I've really run across that could do the harmony like as instinctually as he did. You know what I mean? So it was sort of like, okay, we got a pretty good song, and then these harmonies came into place. You know, it was basically like hit record and see what harmonies Brad will sing.
Yeah, so he was and you guys just kind of followed along.
We followed along. I think he created some of those unique harmonies, and then maybe I'd go above it.
So so like in a song like Other Side or something, like when you guys are singing like I'm just curious who if you like you mentioned writing bridges, so then are you telling Brad to sing at a certain part and I'm going to stop here and you take this line, like, or is it just feeling it out?
I think a lot of it is feeling it out, you know, and trying to say, you know, wow, that chorus that chorus sounds amazing. Let's do that again. But often to get it, we would often record with like a very basic tape recorder, either in a classroom that was empty or maybe going to the art center at the school and getting those basic recordings. And then we would drive out onto some field in cold Vermont where the cows were mooing, and then put that tape recorder down on the grass and listen to it. And so there was really a lot of, there's that great joy when you capture something, right? I mean, you're recording all the time, and that's almost like savoring that. And I really think that in those days, either taking the cassette tape and then going into the car and listening, I think that, gave a lot of that early juice that we were psyched about. But to answer your question, I don't really think there was a set way. Mm-hmm. I think that each of us had our unique talents with it, and that we would discuss it, and then it seemed to work. Or you might say, "Oh, that's cool, keep that," and then
Gotcha.
And I guess, so when you guys first start writing together, so you're bringing your own songs and you're kind of crafting stuff together and hearing what Brad and Chad adds to it. Like, so moving into like Bang Bang or like the next record there, like, did you, I gotta imagine it had to, but each other's influence into your writing when you're writing on your own and bringing it to the group. Did you feel that type of influence? Was there certain ideas that you would take for like, okay, I'm going to save this spot maybe open here and see what Brad, how he harmonizes it. Or like, I'm going to trade verses and see Chad's going to sing this one. And see, like, was there like, did you start the write with those ideas in mind?
I really think so much of it happened in the moment.
Okay.
I don't think that there was too much thought about it. Maybe there was to some extent. I know there were situations where, like, I think the general may have had 3 or 4 more verses that didn't make it, so I think there was an example sometimes where we might edit or try to edit to make certain parts better. But there was an old farmhouse that's probably in some of the documentaries, and it was kind of going there and setting up and hashing it out. And I remember that was a lot of fun. The parts, like getting the lines and feeling tight. That was, I remember really liking that.
Was it? Yeah, that like, so that's like, it's, I mean, like in the moment, it's kind of like the capturing of the film, of the recording of it, being able to take it, figuring out in the moment like that. And like, that's cool. I mean, it makes sense with listening to you guys. Like, it seems so much of a collaboration, and like, but yeah, no, it makes more sense that it's kind of, there's not a descript way into, to describe some like what happened.
Yeah. But to come back to your point of that lighter thing, and it was fun. I think with a lot of that early stuff, it felt fun, so we could get these ideas flowing pretty quickly, or maybe, hey, let's try that, or let's try that at the end. Mm-hmm. And so I would imagine a lot of it was probably worked out with trial and error.
Now, when you started doing your first couple solo records, was it a little bit different of an approach now because you had the songs more worked out? So, or were you still experimenting with the musicians in the studio?
Well, I was pretty lucky for So They Say, because Jack Gauthier, who I mentioned earlier tonight, he worked with a rhythm section, Marty Richards and Marty Ballou. Marty Ballou played bass, Marty Richards drums. And so these guys were just superlative, musicians. And I was able to take a song like Burning the River or Train Window and really just sort of say, hey dudes, this is what I'm looking for. And I think that is a major difference between being a solo artist and with the band, is that in the end it's really my thing, whereas in the band we were obviously agreeing on something. So that new direction is always interesting. And I guess both have their pros and cons. You know what I'm saying?
Because I kind of think like, okay, now I remember what I was going to say before. Like when you're working with a partnership, kind of like how we talked at the beginning, and someone cares enough about what you're doing that they're going to say, let's cut those extra 4 verses out, right? It's going to make because Pat is a notorious, make it shorter, make it,
Yeah,
move to the next.
Our drummer is definitely our edit guy for sure.
Doesn't need to be this long, or just do it once and then we're there. You know what I mean? But like knowing you have someone that cares that much to say, hey, we're going to do this, and like sometimes I gotta feel like sometimes like it's kind of it's a good ego check too to know that this person's doing this because they care. So kind of in a unit when you're working as a band and you have that kind of infrastructure of like, we all care about this, so I'm going to hear what you have to say and hear like the full vision of it, kind of like we were talking about earlier, and see if it's better or whatever, to then go to the spot where you're able to like do whatever you want. Like, was there like kind of like, I don't even know. You know what I mean? Was there ever a moment of like, maybe we make, I don't know, it's cool. You know what I mean? Like,
when it came to my solo stuff, or what?
Yeah, or just like a moment when you're starting to like branch into solo stuff. Like, was it freeing to be able to not have to worry about that kind of like
I think it was a little bit, because bands are bands and people are like, I want this, like, so I think the creative journey to lead me to go and do solo work was a natural one. And then I sort of realized, oh, okay, I really am a songwriter and artist, and I love the visual component. I love the lyrics. I'm going to continue that journey. And I do think working with bands and working people an extended long time, a lot of that, it can get, to me, there was a freshness in those early Dispatch years that I really enjoyed. Later, I maybe it's because when you're younger that you, nobody really knows what they're doing or what's going to happen. And then I think sometimes, we're creatively, if we're sort of stuck in these roles, I guess I don't really want to be stuck.
Yeah.
I really want to feel like I'm around people in the environment that I can experiment in that sort of that way. That's what we were talking about earlier. The Beastie Boys, joyous, funny. And that's so, later on in the band's arc, I didn't feel like that was happening as much.
Well, it's interesting you describe it that way, because if you look at your solo career's arc, that's where your solo career has gone more and more towards, I feel like. So the beginning albums are a little bit more of like that more serious songwritery stuff, and then you get into later stuff like the Dragon Crest Collective, or even Sunfuzz, where you're experimenting and having fun and doing just way different stuff from So They Say. So like, it's very interesting you describe it like that.
Well, thanks. And I think the Pattern Sky record was a reflective record about mental health, well-being. So I don't want to give off the impression that I'm always trying to be silly and profound. Like I love that getting into. I just think as artists that we should feel this, abundance of creative energy, that we can go to places. But some people will say, well, I like the Pete that did that over there, or we may even say the Tom Petty thing or the Chili Peppers. But I guess we're still honoring the artists that we love, or what what path they're on, yeah.
Well, yeah. I think like, and what goes to what we were kind of talking about before, the thing that stuck out to us was that Rick Rubin record where they did that thing they never did before. They were immersed in that creativity, and I think, I don't know, as a creative person, I think that's super important. And I think that funnels its way through you wherever. So to be able to have that initial enthusiasm for whatever it's going to be, to keep doing the thing and keep trying different things, I think that's incredibly important. And I think it's also, it's incredibly important to be doing things. I'm not the best saxophone player, but I'm going to try, and being in that like vulnerable state that keeps that passion going. So I think that's that's to kind of circle back to what you're saying. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I think that's, we're just kind of, we're finding that balance where we want to be around people in situations that it's creatively interesting and that we can create, either a small group or if we can have some gigs, that we feel energized by.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. One thing, so like during the kind of early solo endeavors, when did you like link up with Barefoot Truth? And was that kind of like a way to expand some of those songs that you haven't at that time?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought those guys up because I work with Jay Driscoll a lot, and I'm going to do a festival with Will Evans, and those dudes were great. I think we might have given, I can't remember the whole story, a recommendation for them to work at Lake West where Jack was, and I just liked what they were. I thought their sound was cool. I thought that they probably, were influenced by what we were doing. And then as I got to work with them, I'm just like, these are great guys, and the jams were great. Harmonica, Jay, who I do still do gigs with, is really great slide guitar player. That Ben Harper, the Weissenborn.
Yeah, the lap steel.
Yeah. So I was inspired by those guys, and when we did that, maybe it was a long time ago, 2008 or 9, that we did a tour and an EP together, and that just that had that energy, and also just to go back to like laughs and fun. It was I really enjoyed that.
Was it, and also kind of tie into like some of the new stuff you're working on, G-Love did some stuff on that EP, right?
G-Love, this is my first time working with G-Love on a recorded project.
Okay. For some reason, I think the reason I thought that, because like I had the CD, right? And like there's a harmonic solo and it's ripping, and someone's like cold beverages, and I was like, they're clearly doing something with G-Love on this track.
We might have been joking with that, but Garrett, who plays harp, he's a great dude. He's funny, and we were probably riffing off of, now I'm playing cold beverages and this ain't living to my kids in the morning.
Yeah.
Very
They're
cool.
digging that, so yeah.
That's awesome. But so like, okay, so to kind of, because we haven't really talked about it on the podcast yet, but like, so there's a couple renditions of Smile that you're putting out, one of which is with G-Love. So like, can you talk about working with G-Love before, and like, or just like touring with him, and like how you guys came together to do this remix?
Yeah, so man, right around that time, 2000, I feel like, G-Love was big in Philly and all over, and I feel like, I couldn't remember if it was at like the TLA Philly or the Electric Factory, but I know we were opening, or maybe it was on the West Coast. I know we played with him at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco. But the vibes were always just like, you're the man, you know? And I think even, I remember Chad being like, you know, probably hearing G Love inspired Bang Bang, or inspired how Chad delivered the Bang Bang. And I'm pretty sure he said that on the gig one time. And it was probably a gig we were doing with G Love. And then Garrett was just always friendly and cool with us. And then with my solo work, when my record Untold came out, I think we had the same booking agent or same booking company, whatever. And I was on a bunch of dates with him. And then we hung out on the back of the bus, like playing tunes back and forth. And then just always being like, he's the man. And I have a friend around here. And I was like, yeah, you know, you have G Love's number. I got to ask him, see if he'd be down with doing a verse on Smile. And I sent him, he's like, dude, I love it. And then it's always great. You know, that's the word that has to be said more. Alchemy. When the alchemy happens, you know, it's such a great, I think musicians have to talk words like alchemy and sorcery, because that's what we have and that's what we share, you know, and that's a really super important thing even to talk to kids about, because kids understand magic, and music is another form of magic. And that, you know, when I heard this thing that DeMarco did, the Jamaican guy on Smile, and then when I heard G Love's, you know, it just gives you that breath of fresh, you just breathe easy and you're like, wow, something is beautiful in the world that a little while ago was not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that we as musicians, we have that real ability.
Like a magic orb.
It's a magic orb, you know,
and
and
pass it along, and then it comes back.
Pass it along, or the people come in. I can't tell you how many frat houses in the South the dudes were like, when we walked in, you know, and then at the end they're like, "Do you want a beer? Do you want to hang out? Do you want to crash on my couch?" So that's the thing, you know. That's the people who aren't musicians, you know. You know, that's a certain language and thing that we understand and we talk about, and it was very real. And that's probably one of the main reasons that keeps me a part of this.
Very well said.
Definitely. Like what I was going to say was like, so it's one of our early guitar teachers for Cody and I, like, you're rewarded in a way that it's not money, it's not fame or whatever. There's like these little moments that if you're in a creative field and you're putting your all into it, you have these things that come up like that. Just like the guys that were like, ugh, to like, oh, you know, just like these little moments that are super enriching in a way that's just like, it fuels enthusiasm that kind of like it makes you keep working to meet the guy and put the presence on that record so you can keep appreciating that little moment that you've captured and you get to share. But like it's a real like thing you get to like that a lot of people in other fields that maybe that aren't as creative or self kind of driven in a way don't get the experience, and I think they're beyond valuable.
I agree. I think it's something to, you know, talk amongst musicians about, and you know, it's not something really monetized. I mean, I guess in some sense, but in the sense of talking to other musicians or talking to kids, you know. And I feel like when I'm doing my best work, I think that's happening. When Dispatch was doing Dispatch's best work, I think that was happening. You guys are feeling it now with this new material. And that's where it's at, you know? And that's where let's come back to that, you know?
Yeah.
Totally. It makes me think of a story that I did want to tell you sort of towards the end of this wanted to tell you the story of the first time I heard Long-Legged Fly. So we kind of touched on it earlier, and we are just now talking about it, this musical fulfillment. So, and Dave's done a good job of keeping it nice and profesh in these conversations, but I'm going to gush for a second and just kind of let it flow. That Dispatch was one of, if not the biggest influences on us starting the band. I vividly remember riding in the van when I was like maybe 13 or something with Dave, and him showing me Dispatch and saying, this is like my favorite band right now. You know, like and when you're a teenager, you have these phases where like, this is your favorite band, then this, and when he showed me Dispatch, he said, this is my favorite band right now. And, I remember his ringtone was Steeples for years. For years, that was his ringtone. And so like, this was before we started Sea Level. So when we started Sea Level, one of the big influences we took from being a three-piece and you guys being a three-piece was this sense of individuality, that like you guys each had your own voice. And in the early days of Sea Level, that was something that was really important to us. And so like I'm saying, you guys were one of the biggest influences on us starting the band when we first like started off. And so, you know, flash forward years later when we're working on this song Long-Legged Fly with you, and like Dave said, you were one of like the first person we reached out in this process of these collaborations. And whenever we do these collaborations, there's always this moment where like Dave calls me like, I got it. I got the track. I'm coming over. We're going to listen to it. And so that first time when I heard Long-Legged Fly, I was at my grandma's house, and I don't think she was quite on hospice yet, but she was in her final battles of life, you know, going towards that phase. And I was over there spending time with her, and Dave came over and pulled up in the van, and I came out and sat in the van, and he played me the track. And be honest with you, I teared up. Like I cried, because it was this full circle moment. I had this, you know, everything in life is cyclical, comes in cycles. And I just felt this loop closing of like, wow, I immediately remembered, dude, you showed me Dispatch in the van. We're in the van listening to us playing with them. And it was like the biggest sense of fulfillment that we and Dave talk about. Like, you can't get this sense of fulfillment from a big gig playing to a big crowd, or we don't do it for some big fat check, or you know what I mean? All the accolades you could possibly get from music. You can't get this sense of fulfillment from anywhere else, from being inspired by someone to want to do something to later in life working with them on that. It gives you this like full circle fulfillment. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing that with us, and doing the show with us, and having these conversations with us. It means so much to us. And it's like I'm saying, it's the biggest sense of fulfillment we can have as our 15-year-old selves.
Thank you, Cody. Well, I think we're we're similar brothers from another mother, you know, that's just.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate that.
It's crazy. Yeah, I didn't realize it was all in the van.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I don't know if you've
else.
ever.
No, we've never had this like
linked all that together.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you were probably just like, oh, I got him. He's crying. I know this is a good part now.
Well, it means a lot, man. Thank you for saying that. You know, a huge to play music and to have people feel that they feel my words, feel my music. That's a real deep connection. And I really admire you guys for continuing to be artists, to playing, believing with it, you know, having me out. We're going to have a great gig. And I think we're keeping that flame alive for people, that it's a strong thing of inspiration when someone inspires us, and then how that can then be handed to someone else, or Dave, to the kids you're teaching. Mm-hmm. You know, that energy that you're taking that's super heavy. And I guess that's this year, I think I'm thinking of the word sorcery a lot, because I love that you can kind of have that or work with that with others, where it's not as much something based on status or money or this or that. You know, it's a real, it's an art form, a shared art form.
Absolutely. That's like the biggest thing.
Yeah, man. Thanks for saying that.
Of course. Yeah.
Thanks for doing all this, man. Like,
that's the biggest thing we've learned from this process, because like we never thought we would be able to, most of these people we've worked with, you included, obviously, everyone else that's on the album, I'm not going to name a bunch of names because you're the first one we've told people about, but everyone, it's like we never thought they would even respond to the email, and then you get that back. Yeah, I love it. Let's do it. And it's insane. It's like, it's this crazy feeling of like, whoa, they do care. Everyone does care. Like,
Oh, and I mean, to go, like, the first person I reached out with anything, like we talked about at the beginning, was you, and like it just, it opens up a whole, like, another world of, like, enthusiasm to know, like, wow, this person I admire heard this thing and didn't say it sucked. You know what I mean? Like, it goes back to, like, maybe I can do a thing all right.
It's that alchemy thing. It's like, whoa, I am a sorcerer. Like,
But also, I'll tell you what I admire with you guys, and I think it's a great trait, is to reach out to people, to talk to people. Who can help us with that art? Oh, did you see how cool that artwork he did or she did? Let's reach out to them. You guys, what you did. I think there cannot be enough said about that. If you want to go to certain things or try things, reach out. Talk to someone. What do you got going? Can I learn? Can I help out? That's really what it's all about. I think that and maybe that's with me, is like, I don't want to, who's the next, what producer can oh my God, I met Bonsai Caruso. He did freaking Welcome to Jamrock. Bonsai, we're talking on the phone, dude. You like my song Smile. It's similar to what happened with you guys. My heart starts beating. I'm like, dude, you're fucking cool. I feel cool. Let's,
totally.
Let's do something.
The next one we're going to get, it's going to be Rick Rubin. He's going to produce a track for all three of us.
Yeah, that's the next song we do, Peter. It's going to be
old Rick. I don't...
But
he's a deep Yoda cat, so
we'll have to find him on Mustafar.
Yeah, with some blue milk and no. But like I
got to wrap in the next couple minutes, dudes.
Yeah,
but
totally. It's getting late. Yeah,
so psyched for our show. Cleveland fucking rocks. I can't wait.
On that topic, what's the Dispatch Ain't No Trip to Cleveland thing? Me and Dave were debating this.
These guys, they were even, they were, Brad and Chad, they were more into Bottle Rocket than I was. The movie by, what's his name? Wes Anderson? Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
So they quoted a lot from that movie. And I think there's a line in there where he goes, "Ain't no trip to Cleveland." And they're like, "That's the title." And I'm like, all right, whatever.
We were always like, they hate Cleveland. They hate us. What did we do to them?
No, I don't think it had anything to do with you guys and more about that movie.
Nice.
I thought it was specifically Cody. No,
no. Dave told me that. I thought there was more. I was on a conspiracy theory with it.
Yeah. What's the matter with those dudes? They're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the independent Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Pete, thank you so much, man, for everything, for doing the show, for recording with us, for all the kind words, and taking time to help talk with us and promote the show and do all this. This has been an absolute dream come true. So thank you, man.
Thank you. Well, I'm really psyched, and thanks for inviting me out. We're gonna have a great gig.
Yes, we are.
And we'll just think of these alchemy, sorcery, reaching out, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell the younger folk, this is where it's at. You are a sorcerer.
Yeah.
Just to come back to, it's feel, right? Great quote with Miles Davis. He's like, it's 80%. The motherfucker 20% the note, like, right?
Yeah.
It's all about like how bad you are.
And well, you know what? To on that note, when we think about people who've taught us, right, or teachers that had impacts on us, like for me, and I don't remember what they taught me, but I remember how they made me feel, right?
Yeah.
And like
It really comes back to that, doesn't it?
yeah. So I think the sorcery, the magic, the
We might have to make a new flyer that's like a sorcerer version of you.
All of us are
I'm
like
putting a cloak on the
well, and then it goes back to Spinal Tap. And then then we'll look like we'll get a little stone.
it all full circles. It was great talking with you.
Likewise,
and,
yeah.
Just let me know.
Awesome.
I'm gonna.
We'll let you shake. Thank you so much.
Appreciate
man.
you so
This
much.
is gonna be awesome.
Oh, dudes, this is gonna rock. It's gonna be crazy fun.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, man. All right, Pete.
Have a good night.
Just text me with any questions.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.
That you enjoy the conversation and like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on all podcast platforms. I can do it too.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. No, dude, hit it from the rip. Hit it from the rip. Let me hear it.
And if you enjoy what you're hearing, you could like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on all podcast platforms. And without any further ado, here's our conversation with the great Pete Francis of Dispatch.
That was pretty good. Can we do it together though?
The whole thing? Okay.
If you,
all right.
This is gonna be so fucked. All right.
If you like what you hear. Okay.
All right. If you like,
one, two, three.
If you like what you hear, you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcasting platforms. And without further ado, this is our conversation with the great Francis Patch. All right, we're good. We're good.